There's a moment that almost everyone recognizes but rarely stops to analyze. The moment when the city becomes quieter, messages slow down, expectations fade, and the night begins to feel like a private space rather than a shared one. And for some people, this moment feels more alive than any part of the day. Because while the world is sleeping, their mind finally wakes up. And this is where the psychology of people who love staying awake at night truly begins. Not as a disorder, not as a rebellion against sleep, but as a preference rooted in emotion, cognition, identity, and the way the brain responds to silence, darkness, and autonomy. These are not people who are accidentally awake. Not people who are forced by work or obligation, but people who consciously choose the night, who feel more themselves after midnight, who feel calmer, sharper, freer, and more connected to their thoughts when the day is gone. In my view, this preference says far more about how someone experiences the world than about discipline or laziness. Because night-oriented people are often responding to psychological signals that daylight simply does not provide. During the day, the brain is constantly reacting to noise, to demands, to social expectations, to urgency, to judgment, to performance. And for many individuals, this constant stimulation creates a low-level tension that never fully disappears, even when things seem calm. At night, however, that pressure dissolves, not because problems disappear, but because the environment changes and the brain is extremely sensitive to environmental cues. Darkness reduces visual stimulation, silence lowers cognitive load. Fewer people awake means fewer social demands. And this combination creates a mental state where introspection becomes easier and emotional regulation feels more natural. From a psychological perspective, the night acts like a permission slip to stop performing and start existing. And this is deeply attractive to certain personality types, especially those who are reflective, imaginative, emotionally intense, or highly sensitive to external stimuli. Many night-oriented people report that they think more clearly at night, not because their intelligence increases, but because distractions decrease. And when the brain is no longer busy filtering noise, it can finally focus inward. This is why so many people choose to play games late into the night, not only for entertainment, but because immersion feels deeper when there is no interruption, no rush, and no awareness of time passing. It is also why conversations at night often feel more honest, more emotional, and more meaningful, because people lower their defenses when the world feels asleep. In my opinion, this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of night preference. Because society often frames staying up late as irresponsible, while ignoring the psychological benefits that nighttime offers for certain minds. Humans are not psychologically identical, and circadian preference is not only biological, it is behavioral and emotional as well. Some people feel energized by sunlight and structure, while others feel overstimulated by it, and for those people, nighttime becomes a refuge rather than a risk. Another key factor is autonomy, because the night feels like the only time that truly belongs to the individual. During the day, even free time feels conditional, tied to schedules, expectations, or the awareness that something else must be done later. At night, especially late at night, time feels owned, not borrowed. And this sense of ownership is incredibly powerful psychologically. People who love staying awake at night often crave control over their time and mental space, and nighttime gives them that without negotiation. This is especially common among people who grew up feeling emotionally monitored, socially pressured, or constantly evaluated, because the night offers freedom from observation. There's no audience at 3 in the morning, and that absence can feel like relief. From my perspective, this is why many creative people naturally drift toward nocturnal habits, because creativity thrives when judgment is low and self-expression feels safe. Writing, music, gaming, thinking, planning, and even emotional processing often feel easier when the mind is not anticipating interruption. Over time, this preference can become part of identity, not just a habit, and people begin to describe themselves as night people. Night owls or nocturnal by nature, not because they reject the day, but because the night aligns better with how they think and feel. Another important psychological element is emotional regulation, because nighttime often dampens emotional intensity rather than amplifying it, contrary to popular belief. While some people associate night with anxiety, others experience the opposite, a calming effect, because nighttime reduces social comparison. During the day, people constantly measure themselves against others. Productivity, appearance, success, speed, and progress, and this comparison fuels anxiety and dissatisfaction. At night, those comparisons fade and the mind can exist without measuring itself against an external standard. In my opinion, this is one of the strongest reasons people prefer the night, because it removes the psychological pressure to be something and allows them to simply be someone. This preference often begins during adolescence or early adulthood, when identity formation is strongest and sensitivity to social judgment is high. Teenagers and young adults frequently discover that night offers emotional safety, and that discovery can shape long-term habits. Over time, staying up late becomes associated with comfort, pleasure, creativity, and control, reinforcing the behavior not through necessity but through emotional reward. From a learning perspective, this is classical conditioning. The brain associates night with positive internal states, so it seeks to recreate them. It is also important to note that people who prefer the night are not necessarily avoiding responsibility. They may simply be aligning their most focused hours with moments when the environment supports deep engagement. Many people report that their best thinking happens at night. Their most honest reflections, their clearest plans, and their strongest emotional insights. I believe this happens because nighttime reduces cognitive fragmentation. There are fewer notifications, fewer expectations, fewer interruptions, allowing sustained attention. This is especially appealing to people with racing thoughts during the day, because nighttime slows the mental pace. However, it is also important to acknowledge that this preference exists on a spectrum. And while staying up late by choice can be psychologically rewarding, consistently pushing sleep too far can gradually affect mood, attention, and emotional balance. Not because night itself is harmful, but because the body still requires recovery. And when sleep becomes irregular, the brain struggles to regulate itself optimally. Briefly speaking, chronic sleep deprivation can lead to irritability, reduced concentration, emotional volatility, and in extreme cases, perceptual disturbances. But these outcomes usually result from imbalance, not from simply loving the night. In my view, the problem is not nighttime preference, but lack of intentionality. People who consciously manage their sleep while embracing nighttime often function well, while those who lose control of their rhythm may experience mental strain. On the other side, good quality sleep, regardless of schedule, supports memory consolidation, emotional regulation, immune function, and mental clarity, and these benefits apply whether someone sleeps early or late, as long as sleep is consistent and restorative. This is why the conversation should not be framed as night versus day, but as alignment versus conflict between preference and lifestyle. Psychologically healthy night-oriented people often structure their lives to protect sleep while honoring their natural rhythm, while unhealthy patterns emerge when preference clashes with obligation. Another overlooked aspect is that nighttime preference is often linked to depth rather than speed. Night-oriented individuals tend to value depth of experience, depth of thought, depth of emotion, rather than efficiency or volume. They may take longer to start tasks but immerse themselves more fully once engaged. This contrasts with day-oriented people who thrive on momentum and structure. Neither is superior, they are simply different cognitive styles. In my opinion, modern society disproportionately rewards day-oriented behavior. Early schedules, visible productivity, and morning routines, while undervaluing the psychological contributions of night-oriented minds. Many innovations, artistic works, and deep intellectual breakthroughs have occurred during late hours, not because of magic, but because the mind was free to wander without pressure. This does not mean everyone should stay up late, but it does mean we should stop treating nighttime preference as a flaw. People who love the night are often more introspective, emotionally aware, imaginative, and sensitive to nuance, qualities that are essential but often misunderstood. They are not running from the day, they are choosing the space where they function best. Ultimately, the psychology of people who love staying awake at night is about alignment, safety, autonomy, and cognitive comfort. It is about finding a mental environment where the mind feels at home. The night provides that environment for many, not because it is dark, but because it is quiet, forgiving, and free from performance. When understood this way, staying up late stops being a bad habit and becomes a meaningful preference. One that deserves understanding rather than judgment, balance rather than suppression, and awareness rather than fear.